The universe had forgotten what humans could do. 300 years of peace had made humanity soft. They traded goods across star systems. They built schools on distant moons. They signed treaties with alien races and smiled at diplomatic meetings. The young humans of this age had never seen war. They did not know the taste of blood or the sound of bombs falling from the sky. But deep beneath the frozen surface of Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, something old waited in the darkness. Admiral Park Taesung had not moved in 3 centuries. His body floated in a tank of blue liquid, frozen between life and death. Tubes connected to his arms and chest kept his heart beating once every hour. His brain dreamed of nothing. Around him, the facility hummed with quiet power, maintained by machines that never tired and never forgot their purpose. The file on Taesung was short. It said he was a war god, one of 12 commanders who had been changed at the genetic level to become perfect soldiers. Their bones were harder than steel. Their minds could process battle information faster than any computer. Their bodies could heal from wounds that would kill ordinary men. During the Unification Wars, when humanity fought against itself for control of Earth and its colonies, the war gods had ended the fighting in 18 months. They had been too effective, too brutal, too dangerous. When peace came, humanity did not know what to do with them. You cannot give a weapon a normal life. You cannot ask a storm to become a gentle breeze. So the United Earth Council made a decision. They put the war gods to sleep, buried them in secret facilities, and erased them from history books. The file on Taesung ended with 5 words. Too dangerous for peaceful times. Far from Europa, on the edge of human space, there was a small world called Hana 7. It was not an important place. The planet had green fields, clean rivers, and simple farming communities. 12,000 people lived there, growing food that would be shipped to larger colonies. Kim, Yuna worked in the communications relay station on the northern continent. She was 26 years old, with short black hair and tired eyes. Her job was boring. She checked signals, fixed broken equipment, and sent weekly reports to Earth. Nothing exciting ever happened on Hana-7. Lee Dawan was the colony administrator. He was 73 years old and had lived on Hana 7 for 40 years. He liked the quiet life. He knew every family in the colony. He attended their weddings and held their babies and buried their dead. Hana 7 was his home, and he could not imagine living anywhere else. Cho Myra was the colony's language expert. She had studied alien cultures at the university on Mars. When she graduated, she was assigned to Hana 7 because someone had to be there in case aliens ever made contact. She had waited 8 years. Nothing had ever come. On the morning, everything changed. Yuna was eating breakfast at her station when her equipment detected something strange. Ships were entering the system. Many ships. More ships than she had ever seen. She sent a message to Dowan immediately. The old administrator arrived within the hour, breathing hard from the walk up the hill. Myra came with him, her eyes bright with excitement. First contact. This was what she had trained for. How many ships? Dohan asked. Yuna checked her screens. At least 200. Maybe more. They're moving in formation toward the planet. Myra was already preparing greeting messages in the standard diplomatic languages. This is incredible, she said. We're making history right now. The first contact on Hana 7. I need to. The first plasma bolt hit the northern settlement at exactly 11:42 in the morning. Yuna watched her screens fill with red warnings. The settlement of Buchan, home to 3,000 people, was burning. The alien ships had not asked questions. They had not sent greetings. They had simply started killing. Dohan grabbed the communication controls. This is Colony Administrator Lee Do-hwan of Hana 7. We are a peaceful settlement. We have no weapons. Please stop your attack. Please respond." The aliens responded by firing again. The second plasma bolt hit the central farming district. The third hit the water treatment plant. By the time the fourth bolt fell, Do-hwan had stopped asking for peace. He was running toward the door, shouting orders for evacuation. Myra stood frozen, her greeting messages still glowing on her screen. "I don't understand," she whispered. "First contact protocols exist for this. They're supposed to communicate. They're supposed to nothing," Yuna said. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "They're here to kill us. We need to warn Earth." She tried the main transmitter. It was dead. The alien ships had targeted communication systems first. They knew what they were doing. This was not their first attack on a helpless colony. Outside, the sky had turned orange with fire. Yuna could hear people screaming in the distance. Ships were descending now, landing troops in the fields. The aliens were not just bombing from orbit. They were coming down to finish the job in person. Yuna ran to the basement of the relay station. She had seen something there once, years ago, when she was cleaning old storage rooms. A machine covered in dust and warning labels. Military equipment from the old days, forgotten like everything else from that era. She found it behind a pile of broken furniture. The emergency beacon was the size of a small refrigerator, covered in symbols she did not recognize. The instructions were written in old military language, but she understood enough. For extinction-level threats only. Authorization required. There was no one left to authorize anything. Do-hwan was probably dead. Mira was pulling survivors from burning buildings. The colony was dying around her. Yuna put her hand on the activation. Switch. She thought about the 12,000 people on Hana 7. She thought about the children in the schools and the farmers in the fields and the old couples who had retired here to spend their final years in peace. She thought about all of them burning because some alien race had decided they were worth nothing. She activated the beacon. The signal was old, using frequencies that no modern equipment monitored. It traveled through space on pathways that had been silent for 300 years, bouncing from dead relay to dead relay, crossing the vast emptiness between stars, that it reached Europa 17 minutes later, deep beneath the ice. In a facility that time had forgotten, machines began to wake. Lights flickered on in hallways that had been dark for centuries. Computers ran programs they had not touched since the Unification Wars. In his tank of blue liquid, Admiral Park Taesung's heart began to beat faster. Once every minute. Then once every 30 seconds. Then once every 10. His eyes opened. The last war god was awake. And somewhere in the darkness of his ancient mind, he remembered what he had been made to do. The Vectari had come to harvest. Their empire stretched across 40 star systems, built on the bones of weaker species. They did not conquer through diplomacy or trade. They simply took what they wanted. If a species was strong, the Vectari avoided them. If a species was weak, the Vectari consumed them. Humanity, they had decided, was weak. Their scouts had watched human colonies for decades. They saw no warships. They saw no weapons platforms. They saw only farmers and teachers and merchants who smiled too much and fought too little. The Vectari High Command had classified humanity as harvesting stock, useful for slave labor and nothing more. Overlord Desik commanded the invasion fleet. He was tall for a Vectari, with gray skin and 4 eyes that saw in multiple spectrums of light. He had conquered 6 worlds before Hana 7. He expected this one to fall within a day. On the surface of the burning colony, Yuna crawled through the wreckage of the relay station. The beacon was active, but she did not know if anyone would hear it. She did not know if anyone was listening on those old frequencies anymore. Outside, The aliens were hunting. The Victari soldiers moved through the streets in organized squads. They were efficient killers, trained to capture the young and healthy while disposing of anyone too old or too injured to be useful. Their weapons made sharp cracking sounds, and each crack meant another human had died. Yuna found Myra hiding in a destroyed building near the town center. The language expert was covered in ash and blood, but most of the blood was not hers. She had been helping wounded people escape when the soldiers arrived. "We need to reach the mountains," Myra said. Her voice was calm, but her hands were shaking. "There are caves in the eastern range. We can hide there." "How many survivors?" Yuna asked. "I don't know. Maybe 2,000. Maybe less. 2,000 out of 12,000. The aliens had killed 10,000 people in less than 3 hours. They moved through the burning town, staying low, avoiding the Victari patrols. They found other survivors along the way, families with crying children, old people who could barely walk, young workers who had lost everyone they loved. They gathered them all and pushed toward the mountains. Lee Dohan was alive. They found him near the eastern road, organizing a group of farmers who had grabbed tools as weapons. He had a cut across his forehead, and his left arm hung at a strange angle, but his eyes were clear and determined. "The beacon?" he asked when he saw Yuna. "Active. I sent the signal." "Good." He nodded slowly. "Someone will come. Someone has to come." They reached the mountain caves as the sun was setting. The Victari had not followed them into the rough terrain. Perhaps they thought the survivors would die on their own. Perhaps they simply did not care about a few thousand refugees hiding in caves. Overlord Desic received reports from the surface and smiled with his wide gray mouth. The colony was secured. 11,000 humans had been killed or captured. The processing ships would arrive tomorrow to begin loading the slaves. He sent a message to the Victari High Command. Hannah 7 pacified. Minimal resistance. Humans confirmed as low-threat species. Recommend expanded harvesting operations in this sector. The message traveled across space to the Victari homeworld. It was received, analyzed, and approved. Within days, more invasion fleets would launch toward other human colonies. None of them knew about the signal. On Europa, the resurrection protocols had begun. Admiral Park Taesung's body was being prepared for consciousness after 300 years of frozen sleep. It was not a gentle process. The machines drained the blue liquid from his tank. They pumped his blood full of chemicals that forced his cells to wake up. They sent electrical pulses through his muscles, making them contract and release, remember how to move. His enhanced biology did the rest, healing damage that would have killed any normal human. Taesung's first breath in 3 centuries burned like fire in his lungs. He fell forward out of the tank, landing on his hands and knees on the cold metal floor. Blue fluid poured from his mouth and nose. His body convulsed as it remembered how to exist. "Admiral Taesung." A familiar voice filled the room. "Resurrection complete. Please remain still while your systems stabilize." The voice belonged to Beak Jisoo, the artificial intelligence that had served as Taesung's tactical companion during the Unification Wars. She had been sleeping too, waiting in the facility's computers for someone to need her again. Taesung tried to speak, but only a rough sound came out. His vocal cords had not been used in 300 years. "Take your time," Jisoo said. Her voice was warm, almost human. "Your body is recovering faster than expected. Enhanced healing factors are functioning at optimal levels." Taesung forced himself to stand. His legs felt weak, but they held. He looked around the resurrection chamber, a small room of white walls and humming machines. Everything was exactly as he remembered it. "Why am I awake?" His voice was rough, but the words were clear. "An emergency signal was received 17 minutes ago. Origin point, Colony Hannah 7, Outer Territories. The signal used Unification-era military frequencies and emergency codes. I determined that this justified resurrection protocols. Taesung walked to the nearest computer terminal. His fingers remembered the commands even if his mind was still foggy. He accessed the tactical network, searching for information about Hana 7 and the situation there. What he found made him stop breathing. Images filled the screen. A burning colony. Dead bodies in the streets. Alien ships in orbit. The Vectari, he recognized them from old intelligence files. A species humanity had never encountered directly during his time. Current human military capacity? He asked. Minimal, Jisoo replied. The United Earth Defense Force was disbanded 200 years ago. Most warships were scrapped or converted to civilian use. There are no active military installations, no standing army, and no weapons production facilities currently operating. Taesung stared at the images of burning homes and crying children. He saw a young woman carrying an injured man through rubble while alien soldiers chased them. He saw an old man standing in front of a group of children, trying to protect them with nothing but his body. Something cold and hard began to form in his chest. Something he had not felt in 300 years. The war forges on Mars, he said quietly. Are they still intact? Dormant but functional. The manufacturing templates from the Unification era remain in their databases. However, reactivating the forges would require authorization from the United Earth Council. Taesung turned away from the screen. His eyes had changed. They were no longer the eyes of a man waking from sleep. They were the eyes of something older and far more dangerous. Contact the Council. Tell them Admiral Park Taesung has returned to active duty. Tell them that humanity is under attack and that I am taking command of military operations effective immediately. And if they refuse to authorize your actions? Taesung was already walking toward the door. His body was still healing, still recovering, but he did not have time to wait. People were dying. Children were being taken as slaves. Some alien empire had looked at humanity and seen nothing but meat to be harvested. Then I will remind them, he said, why the war gods were created in the first place. Behind him, Jisoo began sending messages across every communication network she could access. Military frequencies that had been silent for centuries suddenly came alive with data. The machines of war were waking up, and the galaxy was about to remember what humanity had tried so hard to forget. The United Earth Council met an emergency session for the first time in 80 years. 12 representatives sat around a curved table in the Great Hall on Luna, Earth's moon. They were politicians, diplomats, and administrators, people who had spent their lives managing trade agreements and cultural exchanges. None of them had ever seen war. None of them understood what was coming. Council leader Yoon Hana spoke first. She was 62 years old, with gray hair and a calm voice that had guided humanity through decades of peaceful expansion. We have received troubling reports from the outer territories. Colony Hana 7 has been attacked by an alien species called the Vectari. Casualties are significant. How significant? Asked another council member. At least 10,000 dead. The remaining survivors are hiding in the mountains. Silence filled the chamber. 10,000 deaths. It was a number too large to understand, too terrible to process. We must send diplomatic envoys, someone suggested. Open communication with this Vectari empire. Find out what they want. They want slaves, said a voice from the chamber entrance. Everyone turned. A man stood in the doorway, tall, muscular, wearing a military uniform that no one had seen in 3 centuries. His face was hard, and his eyes burned with cold fury. Admiral Park Taesung, Council Leader Yoon said slowly. You were supposed to remain in stasis. I was woken by an emergency signal. Taesung walked into the chamber without waiting for permission. A signal that told me humanity was being slaughtered while its leaders sat in comfortable chairs discussing diplomacy. You have no authority here. The war gods were decommissioned after the Unification Wars. You are a relic of a violent past that we have moved beyond. Taesung stopped at the center of the chamber. He looked at each council member in turn, and each one felt the weight of his gaze like a physical force. The Victari do not care about your past, he said. They do not care about your peace treaties or your cultural exchanges. They see you as livestock. They will take your people as slaves, work them to death, and then come back for more. That is what they are. That is what they do. You cannot know that, another council member protested. We have never encountered this species before. There may be room for negotiation. I have accessed all available intelligence on the Victari Empire. Taesung's voice was flat, emotionless. They have enslaved 11 species. They have destroyed 3. They do not negotiate with species they consider inferior. And they consider everyone inferior. Council leader Yoon stood up. Even if what you say is true, we have no military. We have no weapons. We dismantled everything after the Unification Wars because we still believe that violence is not the answer. Violence is always the answer when someone is trying to kill your children. The words hung in the air like a THUNDERCLAP. Taesung turned away from the council. I am not asking for your permission. I am informing you of my actions. The Mars war forges are being reactivated. Old military personnel are being recalled to duty. Within 72 hours, I will have a fleet capable of defending human territory. You cannot do this, Yoon said. The forges were sealed by council order. Council orders mean nothing to dead colonists. Taesung walked toward the exit. Stay out of my way, or I will move you out of my way. The choice is yours. He left the chamber without looking back. On Mars, the war forges had been sleeping for 300 years. They were massive underground factories, built during the darkest days of the Unification Wars to produce weapons and ships at incredible speed. When peace came, they were shut down and sealed. Their entrances buried under tons of Martian rock. Now, those entrances were opening. Jisoo had sent activation codes to every forge on the planet. Machines that had not moved in centuries began to hum with power. Assembly lines started rolling. Manufacturing bots woke from their long sleep and began building. The templates in the forge computers were old, but they had not been erased. They contained designs for warships, not the sleek, elegant vessels of the modern age, but brutal machines of destruction. Ships with thick armor and massive guns. Ships designed for one purpose: killing. The first ship rolled off the production line 18 hours after activation. It was ugly, all hard angles and weapon ports, painted in flat gray that absorbed light. The humans who saw it felt something strange in their chests. Fear, perhaps. Or maybe something older. Something their ancestors would have recognized. Pride. Across human space. Old soldiers were hearing the call. Shin Yoonji was teaching history to 15-year-olds on a station orbiting Saturn when she felt it. A vibration in her bones that she had not felt since the Unification Wars. She excused herself from class, walked to her quarters, and found a message waiting on her personal terminal. Admiral Taesung requests your presence. Report to Mars Forge Alpha immediately. Eunji was 340 years old. She had been one of Taesung's battalion commanders during the wars. After the peace, she had tried to forget what she was. She had become a teacher, a counselor, a grandmother to children who were not her own. She had built a quiet life. Now the war was calling her back. She packed her bag in silence. When her students asked where she was going, she smiled and said she had family business to attend to. It was not entirely a lie. Han Wanjin received his message in a monastery on the dark side of the moon. He had spent 200 years there, meditating, praying, trying to wash the blood from his hands. He had killed thousands during the Unification Wars. Every night, he saw their faces in his dreams. When the message came, he wept. Then he put on his old uniform, which still fit perfectly, and walked out of the monastery without saying goodbye to anyone. Other veterans answered the call. Engineers who had built the original war forges, pilots who had flown the old warships, tacticians who had planned the great campaigns. They came from all corners of human space, drawn by something they could not explain. The blood remembers, Taesung had once said. When war comes, the blood always remembers. On Hana 7, the survivors were running out of hope. 5 days had passed since the attack. The Victari had not pursued them into the mountains, but they had not left either. Their ships still orbited above, and their soldiers still patrolled the ruins of the colony. Yuna climbed to a high point near the cave entrance every morning, watching the sky. She did not know if her signal had been received. She did not know if anyone was coming to help. She only knew that if she stopped hoping, she would stop fighting. Lee Do-won organized the survivors as best he could. They rationed food, treated the wounded, and tried to keep the children calm. But everyone knew the truth. They could not hide forever. Eventually, the Victari would come for them. Someone will come, Do-won told them every night. Humanity does not abandon its own. Some believed him. Most did not. On the 6th day, Myra detected something on her damaged scanner, a signal, very faint, coming from deep space. What is it? Yuna asked. Myra shook her head in disbelief. Ships, human ships, moving very fast. She looked up, her eyes wide. Someone heard us. Far away, Admiral Park Taesung stood on the bridge of his new flagship. The ship was called the Awakening, a name chosen by the crew, who understood exactly what was happening. Behind him, 11 more warships moved in formation. It was not a large fleet. It was not supposed to be. The old humans had a saying, "It is not the size of the wolf that matters. It is the size of the fight in the wolf." And this wolf had 300 years of rage burning in his chest. Set course for Hana 7, Taesung ordered. Maximum speed. The ships jumped into hyperspace, leaving trails of light across the darkness. The war god was coming, and he was bringing hell with him. Overlord Desik was enjoying his evening meal when his tactical officer interrupted him. "My lord, we have detected ships entering the system." Desik did not look up from his food. "Human ships?" "Yes, my lord. 12 vessels." The Overlord laughed. It was a wet, unpleasant sound. 12? I have 800 warships in orbit. These humans truly are as stupid as our intelligence suggested. They send 12 ships against our armada? He waved a hand dismissively. "Destroy them. I want to watch while I finish eating." The tactical officer hesitated. "My lord, the ships are unusual. They do not match any human vessel in our database. The design appears to be very old. Old ships, old tactics, old defeat. Destroy them." The officer bowed and returned to his station. Desik continued eating, imagining the brief fireworks display that would accompany the destruction of these foolish humans. He did not notice the worried looks his officers exchanged. Admiral Taesung stood on the bridge of the Awakening, watching the Victari fleet on his tactical display. 800 ships arranged in standard defensive formation. Heavy cruisers in the center, lighter vessels on the flanks. A formation designed to intimidate, not to fight. "They think we are here to negotiate," Shin Yunji said. She stood beside Taesung, her old commander's uniform fitting her like a second skin. 300 years had not dulled her instincts. "They will learn their mistakes soon enough," Taesung replied. He studied the enemy formation with cold, calculating eyes. Their center is weak. They have placed their flagship too far forward, surrounded by support vessels instead of combat ships. The Overlord wants a good view of his victory. Han Wanjin appeared at Taesung's other side. The former monk had not spoken much since leaving his monastery, but now his eyes were clear and focused. Their flanks are extended. They expect us to try to run around them, because that is what any sensible enemy would do, Taesung agreed. We will not be sensible. The bridge crew waited in tense silence. They were veterans, all of them, pulled from retirement and quiet lives. They had hoped never to fight again, but they had also never forgotten how. All ships, Taesung said calmly, arm primary weapons. Load singularity torpedoes in tubes 1 through 6. Prepare neural disruptors for close engagement. The weapons he named had been banned by Galactic Convention centuries ago. They were considered too destructive, too cruel. During the Unification Wars, a single singularity torpedo had destroyed a moon. Neural disruptors killed by attacking the nervous system directly, causing death so painful that entire armies had surrendered rather than face them. Humanity had locked these weapons away after the wars, disgusted by their own capacity for destruction. Now Taesung was unlocking them. Sir, one of the younger officers said carefully, those weapons are prohibited under the Geneva Titan Accords. The Geneva Titan Accords apply to wars between human factions, Taesung replied without turning. We are not fighting humans. We are fighting monsters who have enslaved 11 species and killed 10,000 of our people in a single day. His voice hardened. These monsters wanted to see what humanity could do. I intend to show them. On Hannah 7, Yuna watched the sky through a gap in the mountain caves. She had seen the human ships arrive. She had counted 12. She had also counted the Vectari ships. 12 against 800, she whispered. It's not possible. Beside her, Mira was monitoring communications with her damaged equipment. They're broadcasting on old military frequencies. I can barely understand the codes. They're from the Unification era. What are they saying? Mira shook her head slowly. They're not asking for surrender. They're not negotiating. They're just declaring their presence. The broadcast reached every ship in the system, every human survivor, every Vectari soldier. It was simple, direct, and carried the weight of 300 years of silence. This is Admiral Park Taesung of the United Earth Military Command. I am here for our people. Release them, and you may leave this system alive. Refuse, and I will demonstrate why humanity chose to sleep for 3 centuries rather than inflict itself upon the galaxy. Overlord Desik heard the broadcast and stopped eating. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his gray features. He had studied human history. He knew about the Unification Wars. He knew about the war gods, but those were ancient stories. Surely the humans had forgotten how to fight. Respond to their message, he ordered. Tell them to surrender immediately or face destruction. The response came back within seconds. Not words data, tactical readouts, weapon specifications, a simple demonstration of what the human ships were carrying. The Vectari tactical officer turned pale. My lord, they have singularity torpedoes, multiple warheads, and something called neural disruptors. Our databases list these weapons as theoretically possible, but never deployed because of what? The officer swallowed. Because they were considered too inhumane, even by humans. Desik stared at the tactical display. 12 ships. Just 12 ships. But suddenly, the numbers did not feel as comfortable as they had before. Attack, he ordered. Full fleet assault. Overwhelm them with numbers. 800 Vectari ships began to move. On the awakening, Taesung watched the enemy fleet advance. His face showed no emotion. He had done this before, many times, in a different war. The numbers were different, but the feeling was the same. "They're coming in fast," Yunji reported. "Formation is holding. They plan to swarm us. Let them come." Taesung's hands moved across the tactical console. "Signal all ships. Execute attack pattern Omega-7. And launch the torpedoes." 6 singularity torpedoes erupted from the human fleet. They were small, almost invisible against the darkness of space. But inside each one was a compressed point of gravity so intense that it could tear holes in reality itself. The torpedoes hit the center of the Vectari formation. The effect was immediate and devastating. Space itself seemed to twist around the impact points. Ships that had been dozens of kilometers apart suddenly crashed into each other as gravity pulled them inward. Hulls crumpled. Reactors exploded. In seconds, 200 Vectari ships were gone, not destroyed in the traditional sense, but compressed into twisted balls of metal and flesh. Desik watched in horror as a third of his fleet vanished. What was that?" he stammered. No one answered. Everyone was staring at the tactical display, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. The human ships did not pause. They accelerated straight into the chaos, weapons firing. The 12 vessels moved together like a single organism, each one covering the others, exploiting gaps in the enemy formation with perfect precision. Taesung commanded from the center, issuing orders that his officers executed without hesitation. He saw the battle not as chaos, but as a puzzle. Every enemy ship was a piece to be removed. Every movement had a counter. "Target the command vessels," he ordered. "Ignore the smaller ships. Cut off their head, and the body will die." Yunji led the attack on the left flank. Her ship tore through Vectari cruisers with brutal efficiency. Wanjin commanded the right, his vessel moving with almost poetic grace through the battlefield. The Vectari tried to fight back. They had numbers. They had firepower. But they had never faced an enemy like this. Every tactic they tried, the humans countered. Every trap they set, the humans avoided. It was like fighting ghostess enemies that knew what you would do before you did it. 3 hours into the battle, Desik's tactical officer made a grim announcement. "My lord, we have lost 400 ships. The humans have lost none." Desik could not believe it. "None? That's impossible. Their ships are different. Their armor absorbs our weapons. Their pilots react faster than our targeting systems can track. And their weapons," the officer shuddered, "their weapons are not meant to disable. They are meant to kill." The overlord looked at the tactical display. His great fleet, his instrument of conquest, was being systematically dismantled by 12 old ships crewed by humans who should have been forgotten by history. For the first time in his life, Desik felt fear. "Signal the fleet," he said quietly. "Full retreat. Get us out of this system." "My lord, if we retreat, the Vectari Empire will survive without this colony." Desik screamed. "Order the retreat." The surviving ships began to turn, engines flaring as they tried to escape. But Taesung had anticipated this. He had planned for it. "No one leaves," he said softly. "Signal the fleet. Execute closing formation. We're not done yet." The human ships moved to cut off the retreat, and the slaughter continued. The Battle of Hana 7 lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the space around the small colony world was filled with wreckage. 800 Vectari ships had entered the system. None of them would leave. Overlord Desik's flagship was the last to fall. Taesung had saved it for the end, circling it like a predator playing with wounded prey. The Overlord had tried everything: surrender signals, desperate attacks, even an attempt to ram his ship into the Awakening. Nothing worked. In the final moments, Taesung brought his ship alongside the crippled flagship. He ordered his communications officer to establish a direct link. Desik appeared on the screen, gray skin pale with terror. His four eyes darted around, looking for escape routes that did not exist. "You can have the colony," Desik said quickly. "You can have all your people back. I will order the ground forces to release everyone. Just let me go. Let me return to my empire with news of your strength. We will never trouble humanity again." Taesung studied the alien for a long moment. He thought about the 10,000 people who had died in the initial attack. He thought about the survivors in the mountain caves, hungry and terrified. He thought about the slave pens on Victory worlds, filled with people from 11 different species who had no one to rescue them. "No," he said simply. The awakening fired a single shot. It cut through Desik's flagship from bow to stern, splitting it in half. The two pieces drifted apart, leaking atmosphere and bodies into the cold vacuum. Taesung watched until the fires went out. Then he turned away. "Begin descent operations," he ordered. "I want ground teams on the surface in 30 minutes. Find the survivors." The human ships descended through the smoke-filled sky of Hana 7, from the mountain caves. The survivors watched them come, not sleek, elegant vessels, but brutal machines of war that looked like they had been forged in nightmares. Yuna was the first to step out of the caves. Her legs felt weak, and her eyes hurt from days of darkness. But she forced herself to walk toward the landing shuttles. A figure emerged from the lead shuttle. He wore old military armor, scarred and blackened from battle. His face was hard, but his eyes softened slightly when he saw the refugees emerging from the mountains. "I am Admiral Park Taesung," he said. "You've sent the signal." Yuna nodded. She wanted to say something, "Thank you," maybe, or "How did you do it?" but no words would come. Taesung looked at the survivors, at the children clinging to their parents, at the old men and women who had survived impossible odds, at the young people who would carry scars from this day for the rest of their lives. "You survived," he said. "That is what matters. The enemy is destroyed. You are safe." Lini Doan pushed through the crowd. His arm was still injured, and he walked with a limp, but his voice was strong. "Who are you? Where did you come from?" "We were told humanity had no military. We were told no one would come." "Humanity lied to itself," Taesung replied. "It wanted to believe that violence was unnecessary, that peace would last forever. It forgot that peace is not given, it must be defended." He looked up at the sky where his ship still circled. "I am what humanity created when it learned that lesson the hard way. I am what they tried to forget. And I am what they will need again." Myra approached cautiously. "The Victory Empire. They have hundreds of worlds, thousands of ships. When they learn what happened here, they will send more. They will send everything." "Yes." Taesung did not seem concerned. "They will. Then how can we survive? You have 12 ships. They have entire fleets." Taesung smiled. It was a cold expression, without humor. "By the time they react, I will have more than 12 ships. The war forges on Mars are running at full capacity. More ships are being built every hour. More soldiers are waking from peaceful lives and remembering who they really are." He turned to address all the survivors. His voice carried across the mountainside, reaching every ear. 300 years ago, humanity decided to sleep, to forget its teeth and its claws, to become gentle, harmless, unthreatening. The galaxy saw this and thought humanity was weak. They were wrong. He gestured at the wreckage falling from orbit, burning streaks across the sky. "We were never weak. We were resting. We were trying to be better than we were. But when you threaten our families, when you kill our children, when you drag our people away in chains, you wake something ancient and terrible. You wake the part of us that ended wars by making war too costly to fight. You wake the monsters we locked away because we were afraid of ourselves. His eyes swept across the crowd. The Vectari thought they could harvest humanity. Instead, they awakened us. And now every species in this galaxy will learn what the Vectari learned today. Humanity may offer peace, but it keeps war in its back pocket. And when we bring out that war, we do not lose. He turned back to Yuna. You sent the signal that woke me. What is your name? Kim Yuna, she answered. Kim Yuna, would you like to ensure that no human colony ever faces this alone again? She understood what he was asking. She thought about her quiet life at the relay station, about the boring days and peaceful nights, about the world she had lost and the people who had died because no one was there to protect them. Yes, she said. Tae-sung nodded. Good. I need people who understand what is at stake. People who will fight because they have seen what happens when we do not fight. Will you join my command? Yes, she said again, stronger this time. Around her, other survivors stepped forward. Young and old, men and women, people who had lost everything and had nothing left but the determination to ensure it never happened again. Tae-sung looked at them, not with pride, but with understanding. He knew what they were feeling. He had felt it himself, 300 years ago, when he had first been changed into something more than human. Then come with me, he said. There is work to do. Over the following weeks, the news spread across the galaxy. The Vectari Empire had sent a harvesting fleet to a small human colony. That fleet had been completely destroyed by 12 ships. Not a single Vectari vessel had escaped to tell the tale. Other species took notice. Some were afraid humanity had weapons they had never imagined. Others were hopeful perhaps the Vectari could be stopped after all. A few sent secret messages to Earth, asking for alliances, for protection, for the chance to stand beside the species that had just shocked the galaxy. The Vectari Empire itself fell silent. For the first time in its history, it did not immediately retaliate against an attack. Its leaders were meeting in secret, trying to understand what had happened. Trying to decide what to do next. They took too long. 6 months after the Battle of Hana 7, a human fleet of 500 ships appeared in Vectari space. At its head was the Awakening, carrying Admiral Park Tae-sung and his growing army of veterans. They did not come to negotiate. One by one, the slave worlds of the Vectari Empire were liberated. The species that had been harvested for generations were freed. The Vectari military was hunted down and destroyed wherever it tried to stand. Within a year, the Vectari Empire had collapsed. Its leaders were captured and tried for crimes against sentient life. Its territory was divided among the species it had oppressed. Its name became a warning. This is what happens when you push humanity too far. And through it all, Admiral Park Tae-sung remembered the signal. The desperate cry from a small colony world that had woken him from 3 centuries of sleep. The moment when humanity remembered what it truly was. He never returned to cryogenic sleep. There was too much work to do. Too many threats to watch for. Too many people to protect. Kim Yuna became one of his most trusted officers. She led the fleet that protected the outer colonies, ensuring that no species would ever threaten a human world without consequences. She never forgot the day she sent the signal. She never forgot the day the war god answered. In the end, the galaxy learned a simple lesson. Humanity preferred peace. Humanity wanted to be friends. Humanity would trade and talk and cooperate with anyone who approached them with respect. But deep in their history, locked away in secret facilities and forgotten files, humanity kept something else. Something they had created in their darkest hour and preserved for their worst days. The war gods. And if you threatened humanity's children, if you made them bleed, if you pushed them past the point of patience, they would wake up. They would remember, and they would come for you, not with anger, not with passion, but with cold, calculated, absolute destruction, because that was what humanity had learned long ago. In wars that had nearly destroyed them, the best way to end the fight was to make the enemy afraid to ever fight again. The Vectari had forgotten this lesson. The galaxy would not.